Hello and welcome back to the Finish More Music podcast. It's been a while. It really has been a while. It's been about 18 months after recording over 200 episodes back to back. So when you sort of extrapolate that out, that's almost 4 years of not missing a beat and then a big gap. And it kind of feels like recording episode 1 all over again. For a start, I'm in a brand new podcast studio, which is super cool. If you're watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see that in the background. And secondly, yeah, of course, it's a big break, but it is different. There are going to be new things in this podcast. I've taken a lot of time to reflect on it. Of course, expect my latest thinking on all things creativity based, all things personal effectiveness based. If you're a long-term listener to the podcast, you'll know that I very much subscribe to the idea of be, do, have. You've got to be the person who will do the things to get the results, the outcomes, to succeed with the goals that you want. As within, so without. Any change that you want to see starts inside of you. And so absolutely, we're going to be going through my latest thinking on that as well, along with a few sort of surprises along the way. Before we get into this episode, the first thing that I want to do is really say a huge, heartfelt thank you to you if you have reached out to me at any point to say, hey, are you okay? Is the podcast coming back? I miss it. I just want to check in with you. If you sent me a message to say, hey, look, I'd love the podcast to come back. It's sort of changed my life in some meaningful way. You know, I've managed to beat some of my demons, get past some fears. I've learned a bunch of things, maybe from guests, maybe from things that I've said that have helped me to finish more of my music, to help me finish music that lights me up, that excites me, to help me get my music out. I've, got over some of the fears of that come up from having to share my art, and I'm getting it out into the world. Maybe I've got some releases. Or even I had some messages that was like, it was one of the highlights of my week. The podcast, is it coming back? How incredibly humbling and uplifting to hear that. So a huge thank you. We wouldn't have a show. There wouldn't be anything for me to to do if nobody listened, if nobody supported us. So it's really all about you, and thank you so much. So this episode, well, one of the questions, of course, that I received is, where have I been? Where is the podcast? What is happening? It is a big question and it deserves a big answer. So that's where we're going. But fair warning, this is going to get a little dark and it could be upsetting and unsettling. And I just want to put a flag in the ground so that you can see that. It's important to me that I share the story of what's happened. This is a story I have up until right now shared only with my very close inner circle. And it's almost certainly going to be surprising for you when you hear it and the direction that things have taken. But it's my hope that in sharing it, it will, of course, aid and empower you. And there have, out the other side of this, let's say, I have received the most profound lessons in my life, 40 plus years of living, and I've learned so much, and I want to share that with you. The context of the story is absolutely vital, so it's going to get a little bit rough before it gets better, but as I say, it's important that we have the context so that this lands, and hopefully the lessons really empower and impact you as well, and you'll understand some of the new directions and the things that we're going to be covering. So I can't wait to share this series of podcasts that I've written and created to kick us back off with the podcast now being a permanent fixture again. That's what we're doing. And as I say, I'm super excited to share it with you. So let's get stuck in. Okay, so although this episode is the story about where the podcast went, it actually started way back in 2020. So COVID time, which of course none of us can forget, the hardship, the loss, the restrictions. It was a very challenging period of time for a lot of people. And it was really quite near the beginning of COVID that this story really begins. And I found myself sitting on my sofa in my home in Surrey. This was pre us moving to Texas in the US. And I was sitting with my hands in my head, crouched over, rocking backwards and forwards like a madman. And the emotions that I was experiencing, I would say, were terror and desperation. I was scared. I was fearful. I felt like I'd lost my mind. I had no idea what was happening to me. I was in a seriously bad situation. And I'd come downstairs that morning like I would any other morning. I was a little tired. I was a little exhausted. I'll explain why in a moment. But other than that, things were pretty normal. I'd grabbed my coffee. I'd sat down. I'd got ready to get to work. And what I was working on, and perhaps if we step back even further to the reason as to why I was a little tired and exhausted, or quite tired and exhausted, was that 6 months prior to that, we'd made a decision to rewrite our free training workshop. So this is the Finish More Music workshop. If you haven't seen this before, it's a 4-part video series where I am teaching and training and helping people to regularly finish their music, to write the music that lights them up, that excites them, and to get that music out into the world. Because the huge part of being a creative is that connection and that positive impact with other people and that sense of community and sharing what we love about music and our art and being able to express ourselves. And so it's a completely free piece of training, and there's nothing else like it in the industry. It's something that we love doing. And it isn't just me like screen sharing Ableton. In fact, there's none of that. There's a little bit of sort of Ableton and a little bit of talk around technique. However, predominantly, this is me talking to camera. This is like a film set ultimately, and it's filmed at different locations. So this particular workshop, which was rewritten from the ground up, we filmed it at a club in London. We filmed it at my home studio in Surrey. We filmed it at a studio complex in London. And it's me walking around, and it's storyboarded. And it's, you know, the idea of it is that it's educational, yes, but also it's got to be entertaining. It has to be captivating and engaging, because I don't need to tell you, right, these days, if a website doesn't load for you in 3 seconds flat, you're on YouTube watching a cat fighting a rhinoceros or something. You know, our attention span is short. So it has to be filmed in such a way that it's captivating, because I really want to be able to deliver the message and help people. And that's part of my responsibility. And so we have a team who helps us do this, of course, a videographer, my brilliant wife, Anna, who helps to storyboard and put things together. But the reason why I'm explaining this is that to rewrite and to recreate this is a real chunk of work. And to write a script that does all of these things, that teaches, educates, but also is entertaining and engaging, it's quite easy, I find, to write 5 hours of content. Now try getting that down into 3 blocks of 25 minutes, right? And then another piece at the end in the fourth video. So it's this 4-part video series, and it's got to be condensed and compressed. And so you have to do that while simultaneously making sure, okay, does that work from a storyboard perspective? People are like, well, that's boring. Go, okay, well, we need to change that bit. But then if I change that, it changes the bit before. And you can imagine. Now, if you're a scriptwriter, you're like, yeah, I can do this, but I'm not. And the first time that we did this, the first video series, which was, I think, 3-4 years prior to that, it was my greatest accomplishment as a creative. It was the hardest thing I ever did. It was really, really challenging, but we got it, and we got it out into the world, and it was incredible. And as a part of the thought process of rewriting the whole thing and not just sort of adding to it, I thought, well, I've done it before. I've got some experience. This time is going to be easier. No, it turned out to be like the difficult second album, right? There was so much of me putting pressure on myself to continually one-up or two-up everything that I'd done before, that actually I was really dragging myself through broken glass a lot of the time to get it done. I'm incredibly proud of how it turned out and how it's helped people, but it was really, really difficult. And with a brand new workshop that has a brand new sort of list, I guess, of educational points that you're hitting and a whole new flow to it, also that comes with all of the emails and the advertising, and all of the things all need updating, all need rewriting. And between every single episode of this workshop, I deliver free training. And so all of that needed to be written. And we always have roadmaps, PDFs, guides, things for people to fill out. I mean, this really is a complete free piece of training that people get incredible results from. And it requires a lot. And so there's a lot of moving pieces and parts. Now, in the lead up to this moment on the sofa, we'd been filming, of course, everything that I'd written. But because it was COVID, there were a lot of delays and challenges. What could we do? What couldn't we do? What venues could we get in? When could we get in? On one occasion, we were in the club and there were a lot of interruptions. There was a lot of noise, because this is me, to put it into context, like memorizing parts of a script, like somebody, a film star might do, for example. Certainly not a film star in my case, but, you've got to remember bits and then do actions. I'm walking around. It's not just me sort of standing reading an auto cue. There's a lot of me memorizing stuff, doing things, sort of making sure that the workshop is a journey to watch as well as to listen to. And on one of the days, there was a lot of noise and a lot of people not giving us the space they'd promised us to have. And so we had to come back another day and then another day, and there was a real backlog. And this led to a point where we worked 2 23-hour days back to back. So that's 2 hours of sleep across 48 hours, trying to deliver this, trying to be on camera, us all trying to get it right. Our videographer, an absolute rock star, was like up for it. He was doing it, and we got it all done. And then, of course, then it went out, and I had to then write the free training that went between the workshop episodes and deliver those. It's a lot. That's why I was tired. That's why I was feeling pretty damn exhausted. But I was no stranger to this. And I think it's important for me to put a flag in the ground where you can see this, in that I'm an entrepreneur. I've started up several businesses. I've, managed teams. I've dealt with all of those stresses. Before I even became an entrepreneur, I worked as a headhunter in the city in a large firm in London. That was very much work hard, play harder, work even harder, play even harder. So I was used to the lack of sleep. I was used to the stresses, to the pressures. I was used to having to deliver as a creative, because the vast majority of what we do in FMM, the creative aspect of it, has to come from me. That's my role in the team. And so I was used to it. And I thought, fine, I'm tired. I'm a little bit exhausted. This is no problem. This is not my first rodeo. I can do it. And actually, I thrive off of this kind of environment. I love this sort of thing. But there had been one slight difference that I'd noticed. We delivered the workshop and the free training. And after that, we open up the doors to FMM for a yearly enrollment. And it's very much a case of, look, if you took value from the free training and you loved it, and you want to go deeper and you've enjoyed working with me, you've enjoyed me answering your questions and helping you to like the way that we do things, and we bring our existing members on so that people can get a feel of who we are as a community and what the training program delivers if you want to go sort of deeper and stay on that creative journey with us. We'd opened up the doors to FMM, and just to be clear, I'm not a big believer in sort of the hard sell. It's very much a case of, here's the free training. It's how I've always done it. If you want to go back and see some particularly archaic YouTube videos, you can check out our YouTube channel. It's always been how I've operated. Here's a load of me teaching and hopefully impacting people in a positive way. And then if they like what I do and they want to carry on working with me, hey, come along. the hard sell for me isn't sustainable, particularly when you run a membership. Because imagine trying to have a community where you're trying to force people over the edge and then they come in and, well, I don't really want to be here. It really wrecks a community, right? So we'd opened up the doors to FMM. And when we were doing that, and of course, there's more, I guess, training, but also explanation and answering questions. If people are sitting on the fence, we see it as our role to say, okay, hey, what is it that you really want? Who are you? This is what we offer and this is who we are. Is this a right choice for you at the end of the day? And it had been through that week where actually the workload was a little bit less that I'd noticed, along with the semi-exhaustion and tiredness, let's say, there was like this weird hum, this sort of tone in the background of my mind is the best way that I can describe it to you, that I'd never experienced before, that was just this something a little bit off here. And I couldn't really tell what it was, but it was sort of there, really distant in the background, kind of like the hum on a record or something. And sure enough, that had been there the day that I'd come downstairs, grab my coffee, everything was fine. It was the last day of enrollment and it was pretty much plain sailing from here. I had some training to deliver that night. We do like this 3-hour marathon that's very cool where we bring our members on, answer a bunch more questions for people who've been sort of sitting on the fence and they can decide, hey, I'm in or I'm out. And then we shut the doors and we focus on our members. And I'd sat down and Anna had shouted down the stairs at me, hey, I've just realized we're missing an email. So you remember when I said that the creation of all the new video series and all of these things also requires all kinds of new emails and bits and pieces. And Anna was like, it's a short, punchy one. I looked at it. I was like, you know what? That's going to take me 5 minutes. There's nothing complicated about this. And I sat down to write that email. 20 minutes later, I looked and what I had in front of me was still 3 words. I had been struggling to construct a single sentence and I didn't realize it. It was a few words, then go back, then the first couple of words, then go back. It's like pretty much hello and a few other words. And I wasn't able to do it. And after those 20 minutes, there was almost a moment of realization that I wasn't able to think straight. At which point my entire world collapsed around me. It became evident that I couldn't think in any way, shape or form. I couldn't form whole sentences in my mind. When you think about it, your thoughts are words, they're sentences, and I wasn't able to shape anything whatsoever. And I couldn't understand what the hell was happening to me, and I couldn't think my way through it because I couldn't think. And then this feeling of terror and desperation and panic came over me, and I can't even remember whether the laptop that was on my lap went on the floor or I pushed it aside on the sofa. But there I am now, hunched over in a ball, rocking backwards and forwards, holding my head, terrified. What on earth is going on here? I can't think straight. I've just got these emotions welling up in me now and completely taking over me. It was horrifying. And I don't know how long I was there until Anna came down, because obviously no email had arrived and it was supposed to be quite a quick email. And she came downstairs and saw me in this state and she couldn't understand what was happening either. She had absolutely no idea. Now, this is where I guess I get somewhat fortunate. If you're a long-term listener to the show, then you will probably remember me talking about the inner bully and the inner coach, and the fact that I was doing a piece of work with my mindset coach at the time, a lady called Anna Pinkerton, who'd introduced me to this. And you can jump back. We've got prior episodes on this. Now, the stroke of luck is that as well as this piece of work that Anna, my mindset coach, was developing and training me, as well as that being a passion of hers and something she was building out and an expert in, the other part of what she does is that she is one of Europe's leading burnout specialists. And Anna, my Anna, looked and thought, I probably ought to get Keith on a call with her as soon as possible. And as luck would have it, she was available and we got onto Zoom, and I was struggling to articulate, to talk, to have a conversation. It was desperate o'clock. I was in big trouble. And she was able to navigate a conversation with me. And she said to me, Keith, you've hit the coalface. I remember this clearly. You've hit the coalface. And I am telling you now that if you push past this in any way, shape, or form, you are not going to be able to get out of bed for 6 months, 2 years. She works with like top CEOs, entrepreneurs, sports stars. And she was saying to me, what's happened to you? It's not psychological, it's neurological. You have breached the bandwidth of your mind in the same way that an athlete can push their body too far. So you've pushed your mind too far, your brain too far. There's no thinking capacity left, and you're trying to keep push past that point. You're trying to keep pushing past that point. And it's not going to end well. She said, as it is, we need to clear everything out of your schedule immediately. If you push past this, the people that I work with, they can't get out of bed for 6 months, sometimes 2 years. She said, not one of them has ever told me it's worth it. The results they've got in their life, the things they've achieved, whatever project it was they were pushing on, the money they've made, they've never, ever said to me, it's worth it. What will happen to you? You really don't want to go there. And I said, yes, but. Yes, but. Here we go. Yes, but this is 6 months in the making, and this is our final day of enrollment. And this is when the most people tend to enroll, because they've been thinking about it for the week and they want to get their final questions answered. And we've got this 3-hour thing that I do tonight, this kind of marathon. It's a lot of fun, and it helps a lot of people. And my entire team have put their time and energy into this, and they're tired and they're exhausted, and everything is sort of hinging on this last 3 hours. And she said, I don't care. You need to clear it. Not only that, you need to clear your diary for the next few months. I don't want you doing anything. And this wasn't computing to me. As much as I could, start to think a little, as my mind was resting from not trying to do something, there was a little bit of bandwidth and there was a little bit of thought process coming in. I couldn't quite fathom it, because I still had to deliver the training for people who were arriving in the community, and I just couldn't have this happen. And so she said to me, look, here's what this is going to go one of two ways. As it is right now, you're unable to deliver any training. Am I right? And I said, yeah, you've got me. I'm struggling to talk to you. So she said, let alone 3 hours. But here's what tends to happen. When you get right on this tipping point where you've pushed yourself too far, and you've been doing it for weeks now, this isn't a one-time thing. You consistently are not overthinking, but you're pushing your bandwidth beyond its limits day after day after day, and you've been doing it for the best part of 6 months. And this is how this stuff happens. When you get right to this moment where you've hit the coalface, adrenaline can kick in before you deliver some kind of training. And this is what happens with the sports stars, CEOs, entrepreneurs. It's the adrenaline that keeps them going. And that little bit of bandwidth that's going to come back between now and tonight when you deliver this thing. So it would finish at 11. So if we backtrack, what's that? 8, 9, 10. Yeah. So from 9 to 10 to 11, 3 hours, this was early morning. If you get that adrenaline rush, combined with that little bit of bandwidth, you're going to feel like you can do it. And probably you're going to be able to deliver that 3 hours, but the cost of it isn't worth it. And I said, look, I am going to clear my calendar except for the key pieces of training I have to do, but I've got to do this thing. And she was adamant, don't do it. And I, being perhaps, well, in hindsight, foolish, of course, said, I'm going to do it. If I can do it, I will do it. I can't at the moment, but if I can, I will. And so sure enough, around 7 o'clock came round, and I was feeling, I was able to think straight again. And I started to get the adrenaline, because, it's delivering 3 hours of content live to however many people. It can be 1,000 people plus. And so there's adrenaline, there's excitement, there's a bit of anxiety, there's all of these things that are coming up. And I was like, I'm going to do it. I can do this. I'm going to be fine. It was almost like that thing that happened this morning. That was just a thing, that's fine. That's over there and I'm all right now. The naivety of it in a way. And I delivered it. And you know what? The first, I'd say 10 minutes, I was a little bit ropey. I wasn't quite locked in, but then as the adrenaline really took over, I was back to my good old self and I was fine and everything was okay and the world was a brilliant place and I was just riffing and, it was just great fun talking to members and people who were excited to join or people who had just joined and were loving it and were saying to other people, no, come on, come in. This is brilliant. You'll love it. It's just such a buzz. We get to 11 o'clock. Where we end the 3-hour session and then that leaves 1 hour. We shut the doors at midnight and this is where my team and I field any other questions that are coming in on email and so on. You get the idea. So 11 o'clock, we turned the live stream off and it was like someone pulled the batteries out of me. I literally just slumped over the desk. This is in my studio back in Surrey. Anna was sitting next to me. I slumped over the desk and I just started bawling my eyes out, just tears pouring down my face. I was shaking and I was back where I was earlier that day. And it was apparent, I need to go to bed now. I'm exhausted. And Anna was like, look, the team and I, we've got this. Let me just get you to bed and let's get this done. And so I went to bed and, you'll know what this is like, right? When you're really tired and you know that your head is going to hit the pillow and you're just going to pass out, we've all been there, right? And so sure enough, I got ready for bed and I kind of wandered in and I got in bed and I pulled the duvet up around me and I put my head on the pillow, this lovely, comfortable bed, and I'm about to pass out, except that's not what happened at all. The absolute reverse happened. I was completely exhausted, but my mind sped up. Now I'm thinking at 1,000 miles an hour. It's kind of like when you see these time-lapse videos where someone's standing still. In fact, now thinking about it somewhat ironically, we actually did that in Leicester Square for this new video series. There's a bit where I'm standing in Leicester Square and it looks like everyone else is on like fast forward running around me and I'm just like calm in the eye of the storm, so to speak. Well, now I'm not. Now my mind is the storm and my brain is working at a gazillion miles an hour and I can't think for thinking. So imagine that. The thoughts are coming so fast and I can't even catch any single one of them. I'm back to this unable to think, but in a slightly different way now, in that everything feels like it's sped up and it's uncontrollable. And it's, of course, incredibly distressing. And that turned out to be me. That wasn't going to be just tonight. That was now my way of being. That's what I'd done to myself. And so insomnia now became my companion, this crazy mind that's thinking where I'm unable to think, I'm unable to reason, I can't use any of my experience, any of the stuff that I talk to you guys about on the podcast. I can't tap into that because I can't think straight. I can't even meditate. I can't even think to meditate, let alone sitting down to do it. My mind is just going at a bazillion miles an hour and there's nothing I can do about it. And it's terrifying. And I remember that one of the days after that, 2-3 days maybe after it, there was a moment where I felt like I was standing on the edge of an abyss looking in. I even visualized it and I can sort of think back to it a little now. And I felt like I was right on the edge of the abyss, this dark, as black can be hole. And I was teetering on the edge of it. And I felt that one more step forward and I was in. And what the abyss represented to me was me being a madman, was me going into a mental hospital and being like this forever. And that's what it felt like. And it was terrifying, of course. And over those preceding weeks, I would still sort of have these moments of a little bit of clarity where I could deliver a piece of training, but it was two steps forward and one step backwards. As the bandwidth would recover a little bit, I would use it to deliver the training that was promised, and then that would spiral me back down. And I remember it feeling like I was underwater. So when it happened, there was a bunch of days before I did any work at all, and we'd cleared everything from my calendar except these occasional bits of training that I was delivering. It felt like I was underwater. It'd be the best way that I can describe this, with all these thoughts going crazy and I can't think straight. It was claustrophobic. It was like I was underwater. And every now and again, I would come up for air, which would be me being me again. It would be there was some clarity, and it would be for a matter of seconds, and then I'm gone again. I'm like a madman, basically. But because of these, I think, moments of clarity, I felt like there might be some route out of this, but I wasn't sure if it was me forever. And that, I think, was where this abyss thing flashed into my mind. And I remember at one point I had this moment of clarity, and I saw my iPad next to me, and I grabbed my iPad and I opened it up. It's where I do all my journaling. And I had this idea in my mind. Could I write a message to myself so that when I came back out of this, whether it's hours, minutes, and I have another moment of clarity, there'd be a message to myself? And I wrote, and it's still, all of this stuff's in my iPad. I simply wrote, if anyone can get out of this, you can. If anyone can get through this, if anyone can get through this, you can. And I wrote this message to myself. And then when I next had the moment of clarity and I sort of looked around, there it was. And then I would add to it. And I was basically writing myself an instruction manual and encouragement and support to help me get through this, this challenge, this state, I guess would be a good way of putting it. And so sure enough, over the weeks as they went by, the first few weeks were just horrible. It was like it all of the time, with just these little moments of clarity. Occasionally I would have that adrenaline. I'm doing the training, it maybe calmed down a little bit and I was having more moments of clarity, adrenaline, do a bit of training, back down I go. Anna, of course, my Anna, being terrified of the whole situation as well. And then as the weeks went by and I wasn't working at all, other than these little sort of sessions here and there, I started to have clarity more and more, and the crazy thinking was going down. And I'd found out quite weirdly, because I would try to can I distract myself? Like Anna would say, well, what about if you watch Netflix? What would you, if you do something like that? And it wouldn't make any difference. I would just be staring at the screen and words coming at me. But I found out that if I watch shows in a foreign language with subtitles, I could watch the show and have to read the subtitles, and it was enough for my mind to focus on this thing. And then if I went away from it, back to the madness again. And so using these little things, over the 8 weeks, the bandwidth of my brain recovered, the messages helped me to get back to my normal way of thinking, and the insomnia started to subside. It was still there. I was still tired, but about 8 weeks, give or take some change, I started to come out the other side of it, and I started to feel like me again, which of course was incredible. But there was still one thing. You remember the underlying tone, that little background hum, that thing? I would wake up some mornings and it was there. And so I had an agreement with Anna. I'd get back to work and we would start filling my calendar little by little. But if I woke up and that tone, that sense, I can't really describe to you what it was, but it's just there, this underlying sense, feeling, tone in the background. If it was there, then we'd clear my calendar and I wouldn't work, because clearly what was happening would, in my mind anyway, was a little bit of work would then start bringing that bandwidth up. And I think my physiology would be like, hang on, I gave you this warning before. Here it is again. Heed this warning this time. Don't do it. And so that's what we would do. And several, whatever it was, several months went by, and that was the way of operating. On the 2, maybe 3 days that I'd wake up with that tone in the background, Anna brilliantly would clear my calendar, would manage the team, would run everything for me. Incredible woman. So lucky to have her in my life. What an absolute gift. And she would take care of things for me. And little by little, the humming kind of got less. And at that point, I thought, I'm on the other side of this, or I'm almost on the other side of it. I've almost made the recovery. I wasn't, fortunately, one of these people that pushed it so hard and that didn't have the level of support, that find themselves, debilitated for years. And I was hopeful. I was hopeful that it wouldn't be too long until this humming would disappear and I was able to return to who I love being, which is someone who, I absolutely love striving. I love the challenge. I love being in the fight. I love trying to be, do, have, give, and share more in my life. It's important to me. It's the essence of who I am. It's, of course, what's guided me to be an entrepreneur and guided me to help a whole ton of people with their own challenges. And I was really hopeful that, this was going to be not too long until I'd return to that sort of full recovery. As it turned out, that wasn't the case at all. It turned out that I had a false sense of security and safety, and that there was something way worse waiting for me that would put me in a new level of danger that I'd never experienced before. Now, that in itself is a big chunk of story, so we'll cover it in the next episode because it deserves the time. It deserves not to be skimmed over. And so we'll get there. And I realize it's kind of a little bit of a kind of cliffhanger situation, but it's important that we cover it in the same level of detail that we've covered this first half of the story. Before we go, though, I do want to say something very, very important, which is that if you are experiencing any mental health concerns of your own, please reach out for help. I encourage you to reach out and speak to people. And if you're someone who's saying, well, I've already done that, Keith, I'm struggling, I'm in a dark spot at the moment, I've already reached out to people and they haven't helped, I am going to implore you and encourage you to keep reaching out to people, because you will find your person, the person that has got the message and the way of being that connects with you, that will help to guide you out of this. And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And I understand, having experienced it myself, that it can feel like that isn't true, and that what you're experiencing is you forever. I mentioned this thing about the abyss, and the second half of this story gets, believe it or not, even darker. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and you will find it and you will get there. And when you get there, there is a new life, a new you, an enriched form of experience, a way that you will be able to contribute to other people in this world in a way that you've never been able to before. So hang in there and find your people. I promise you, they are there, and you will get through this. So thank you for listening. I realized that this was almost certainly not the episode that you were expecting as the first episode back in the podcast. Normally it's full of lessons and things I'm sharing. I promise you we will get there, because I thought that this burnout and what happened to me, and to be clear, this was, my mindset coach, the burnout specialist, diagnosed this. It was a clinical burnout that I was experiencing. I thought that was because of overworking, and it turned out it wasn't that at all. And I want to share with you what really caused it and what really happened. And we need to follow this journey all the way through to the end in order for it to make sense for you. So I know that we've sort of gone through a kind of darker, more unsettling story than you might have expected from the podcast coming back. Yeah. But I promise you the context and the journey makes sense. And, whether you are or maybe will experience any mental challenges, I hope you can appreciate that, by sharing this, I think it can help other people, because one of the big challenges that we face in that situation is we think it's just us and that we're alone. And that really isn't true. And it can happen to anybody. And so, in the next episode, we're going to go into the second part of this story. And for those of you who've asked me about the time when I lost my hearing and what I did to recover it, it's a part of this story. And we'll get there too, I promise. So, a lot to take in, I know. I hope you're okay. I hope it wasn't too rough of a ride. As I said, fair warning, next episode, perhaps even more rough of a ride. But we'll get through it. And there's some really profound lessons that I want to share, and it will all make sense and come together, I promise. So take care of yourself. I love you to pieces. Thanks so much for joining me for the rebirth of the podcast. We've got a lot of ground to cover. Take care of yourself wherever you are. Lots of love and happy music making.